Coming back to the pandemic, we've all suffered quite badly. We have a very, very fragile P&Ls, and from a hotel industry point of view, I can tell you that with a very heavy fixed cost infrastructure, and specifically the new hotels where people borrowed money at very high cost, and even putting up a hotel in India is extremely difficult, despite of the fact that thinking that it's quite a cheap market, getting the right plot of land at the right place costs you a hell of a lot of money. And that's kind of really impacted the industry over the last, I would say, 18 months.
I'll just begin the session. Welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and pleasure to reconnect with everyone and our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the thing input and the rich experience they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher level of dialogues through the online mode as well. For those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for senior leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sectors such as e-mobility, energy, hospitality and tourism, real estate, healthcare, logistics, aerospace and defense, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinars and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with close to 10,000 like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Those leaders among you who are interested, please do join in. I will share the link to the app in the chat section and will soon be sending invitations to our leaders post our webinar. And today we are privileged to have big minds and leading thinkers of the industry join in for our hospitality and tourism communities discussion. The topic for today's session is hospitality and tourism, more baggage. Just in the best interest of time, I will just briefly mention the names and designations of our panelists. We have with us Mr. Ashish Kumar, a thought leader and co-chairman at FICCI Travel Technology and Digital Committee. Mr. Ravish Swarup, CEO, Praxis Services and OneFineRate.com. Mr. Parveen Kumar, SVP Sales and Marketing, the Indian Hotels Company. And our chair and moderator is Mr. G. Raghavan, Corporate CEO across sectors, Certified Independent Director and Director Blue Circle. Welcome everyone. And I now request Mr. Raghavan to please chair and moderate the session, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gautam. I add my warm welcome to all the distinguished panelists. And I also extend a very warm welcome to the guests who have joined us for this webinar. Today's topic is hospitality and tourism, more baggage with a question mark. Taj Mahal, temples, train rides, tuk-tuks. These have traditionally been the images that conjured up an average tourist's mind when we talk about Indian tourism and hospitality. We all have been in cocktail circuits where conversations have run something like, if only we could leverage the Indian tourism and hospitality potential, we can be the richest country in the world. Look at how they have leveraged even a small thing like a Leaning Tower of Pisa into a global tourist destination. The narratives have been changing in the country with Incredible India, Atithi Devo Bhava, Udan, and the goal of making 15 domestic tourist destinations by 2022. Underneath these images and narratives, what is really happening in the sector that has enjoyed a situation of 24 million tourists coming into the country, spending over $25 billion annually, and giving employment to over 40 million people in the country. How has the sector evolved over the years? What are the trends that we see today? Where are the opportunities and where are the uncertainties? What has been the impact of COVID? How is the recovery like? Is talent availability an issue? We see that in many, many sectors. Is it so for this sector as well? If so, how is the industry coping with? How can aspirants to this industry look at this industry to make a career in this industry going forward? Technology. There is no industry that has been spared from embracing technology. How is that happening in this sector? How much is sustainability a part of the plan? Is there a thinking about addressing things like accessibility, inclusive employment, and so on and so on? Lots of questions. And here is where you are going to get a lot of good answers, because what we are fortunate today to have are the very leaders who possess the actual hands-on experience as well as the intellectual firepower to talk about these things and articulate a future. I'm extremely pleased to welcome the panelists here, Mr. Ashish Kumar, Co-Chairman, FICCI Travel and Technology Digital Committee. I'm going to be requesting you to say a few words, Mr. Ashish, but before that, let me do a little bit of an introduction about you. Ashish Kumar is a well-acknowledged travel industry leader, having pioneered growth and transformational stories of several large travel entities in a career spanning over 41 years, having led them both as a CXO and an advisory role. He has been a subject matter expert for global consulting firms such as Deloitte, KPMG, and CAPA. Carrying on with this desire to evangelize and democratize travel technology and knowledge, especially during the COVID times, he fostered the very well respected industry talk show called Coffee with Ashish, which can be visited on his respective website. He also leads and drives the travel startup ecosystem, a very important part of the ecosystem, over several years, having represented Amadeus Next program in India, as well as being the founder of Startup Mentor Board. He is currently the co-chairman of FICCI Travel Technology and Digital Committee and takes strategic approach in guiding, mentoring, and being advisor to boards of travel enterprises. Ashish, with your broad and long-standing background and reputation, it'll be nice if you can give your opening remarks to this very important topic of today. Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Raghavan, and thank you, Gautam, earlier on. Interesting topic. Let's just look at the topic by itself. Travel, hospitality, more baggage. And I want to deep down on this word of more baggage. If I look at the kaleidoscope over the last 4 decades, and it's important to look at the landscape of how it's evolved over a period of time very quickly. A period prior to the 70s or 80s were full of travel, tourism, and hospitality companies which were family oriented, which were run by big families. So they were the large firms, they could have been medium firms, or they could have been smaller SMEs, but they were all very family driven enterprises. So innovation and changes didn't happen to the travel and tourism industry as you see it today in those days, because I thought changes were thrust on them rather than they willingly embraced them. So the larger family enterprises, and I don't want to name the specific companies, have to actually, in the 90s, eject out and sell themselves to so-called multinational companies which came in. And they came in simply here because I know the promoters and the families, because I worked with some of them, realized that they won't be able to keep in with the changing paces across the world, in really the corporate sector, because the industry in those days wasn't well defined, be it into inbound or outbound or corporate travel or MICE. It was one big industry of travel tourism. So everybody did everybody. In fact, those family-run entities I'm talking about in the 70s and 80s also did air freight. So they were all part of one entity. So they had to sell out and they moved away. And if you look back today, none of the family businesses survived. It's the larger who have come in, be it Carlson, Wagonly, etc., for example, who have bought over family businesses. So therefore, what the point I make, that the baggage really started from there because they didn't change, they didn't adapt, and they realized that to survive, they had to get out of the business. And it wasn't so much that they sold out for great valuation. All I would say, they sold out at the right time, otherwise they would have sunk like stones. Then you come into into the 90s. So when 90s was a period where in 1999, so therefore this was mostly corporate travel entities which came and bought these companies, and corporate travel became more scientific, which meant how do you manage your corporate travel, expenses around it, audits around it, and so on and so forth. In 1999, there was a revolutionary change which happened. And this is what laid the foundation of the industry which you see today. We were earlier in what we call FERA, which is Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. It moved away into FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act. By virtue of Foreign Exchange Management Act, Indians traveling overseas were certainly entitled to more foreign exchange to travel on holidays than erstwhile $500 every 3 years, which a foreign travel scheme allowed. So with economic growth and FEMA coming into place, the early 2000s saw more money in terms of the ability to spend more overseas to go. And that's where the outbound and the holiday business started, if I may use the word booming, but not booming really, the baggage moved away to evolving. And then you cut to circa 2000, right? The year 2000 decade is when we saw the first internet penetration of some companies, including Make My Trip being germinated in 2001. And that's when the industry started realizing, and there were great detectors, of course, to say that we don't see much of a B2C audience. It's always a travel agent kind of a, be it family run, be it professional run, is a separate. So when the internet started penetrating in 2000 and beyond, it took about 4 or 5 years, which is right up to 2005, to have the speed and the growth of internet penetration in India. So it's important to talk that, because current viewers would look at what things are today, but it's important to see that this industry, and when I talk about baggage, didn't evolve on its own. It evolved because, like they say, greatness was thirst on it rather than embraced on it. Shakespeare said it, I don't say it. So in 2000 to 2020, so we had a series of, that's when internet started evolving. That's when what they call the 1 million internet penetration. That's where clear demarcation started coming between a B2C and a B2B and a B2C and a B2B2C and all those kind of fancy distribution channels. Then we are standing in 2020. And then you're hit by a black swan event known as the COVID. That's where we were. And of course, don't forget, somewhere in that landscape, the aviation industry went to a metamorphosis, where purely from Indian Airlines to more private carriers coming, skies opening up, distribution and technology making the tickets more accessible, etc. So when you came into COVID as a business transformation, to me, if I look back into 2021 today, COVID has been nothing, but to me it's been, sorry if I may say so, the best thing which could have happened to this industry. It is the worst thing which could have happened to the industry, and it is also the best thing which could have been happening to industry, because to me, it is the chief transformation officer. Guys like me, who has then later moved on into advisory capacities, have been trying to evangelize, pushing travel industry to change, adapt change, to put in technology, put in digitalization, put in the customer interfacing. Very reluctantly, they would move because they didn't want to spend. They thought technology came free. So you had the global distribution system, GDS, which would distribute air. So they gave it free to smaller agents, bigger agents. So suddenly everybody thought technology is something you don't pay for. And it's only when COVID comes, do they realize that you need to be where you need to be. And side by side, what started happening was when the economic prosperity moved to smaller towns. So the travel industry wasn't revolving around the Delhi and the Mumbai and the Bangalore later on, of course, or the Hyderabad, but it moved into Bhubaneswar and it moved into Balasore, and the travelers were based all over Hosur, wherever they were based, or the Nilgiri. So therefore, with the internet penetration went the customer. And today you are sitting in a position that you are probably staring at the next billion internet user. And when you're looking at that, how is that going to be facilitated? And obviously somewhere mobility and mobile interfaces made a great difference, because we all know in the e-commerce space what mobility has done, what mobile has done. You can sit and order your food from a train, on an app of Swiggy. So therefore, if you look at it today, the whole travel, tourism, hospitality industry is actually revisiting what it was earlier, and which is the lines are getting blurred again. So you maybe.
I think I just want to, you got so much juice to give. I think one of the beautiful things about what you're saying is you've been able to trace the evolution of the industry for such a long period of time. Very few people like you are there who have really been able to look at it over a long period of time in so many segments. I got lots of questions to ask you. I'm going to be moving forward to Ravish. But when I come back, there are so many interesting things that we'd like to hear from you, particularly given your deep knowledge about the way the industry has evolved. It'll be very interesting to hear your own prognosis of how things you see them happening, and how is the industry making itself future proof, and how is the technology adoption as well as the merging of various customer segments. I know you have a lot of good views about this. I'm going to be coming back to you on a rebound, but thank you very much for setting this beautiful context of bringing an overall image for the industry first. So if you, I'll just come right back to you. But sure. I would like to move and ask certain opening comments from Mr. Ravish Swarup. Ravish is the founder, CEO of Praxis Services, an online travel portal, onefinderate.com. Praxis Services is a business process management company that offers operational excellence with a deep domain expertise in hospitality and travel management. The company's unique business model delivers comprehensive business solutions for reservation sales, revenue management, online sales and distribution, CRM, database marketing, and sales lead management. The company deploys advanced analytics to business decisions that enable customer acquisitions, sales force effectiveness, marketing ROI, process improvements, and profitability management. Established in end 2011, Praxis manages over 200 hotels and approximately 23,000 rooms daily for revenue optimization at its state-of-the-art global delivery center in Gurgaon, NCR. Prior to this, Ravish was with the Oberoi Group for over 20 years, where he last served as a senior vice president. He's an MBA and a graduate from the Oberoi Center for Learning and Development. Congratulations on the 10th anniversary for your company, Praxis, Ravish. We have lots of questions. It'd be nice if you can set up an opening context with your perspectives. And I'm going to be coming around to you in the rebound. A lot of questions on the technology space, because you are someone who seems to have not just talked about it, but actually used it in running the core businesses that you've started. So I'll come right back to you. In the meanwhile, would you like to give us your opening remarks for a few minutes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raghavan. It's a pleasure to be invited on this forum. Yes, started off my career as a young hotelier, but very quickly got thrown into the web of technology. I saw various things, from the launch of the first version of OberoiHotels.com and TridentHotels.com, and that was a time when the country was waking up to embracing GDSs, and then finding in the midst of the business process management company, that's what the country's delight was at that stage. So to extending on to Ashish's thought, detour my thoughts that, how our business has really been a fractured understanding of technology, and therefore, delighted to, given that I was an early embracer for not only my earlier company, but for the fact that the business model that we created with technology as the backbone. And all that it can be done because, COVID has really taught us, and to borrow the expression that Ashish used as a chief transition officer, that has accelerated the need of technology really, and we do not have an option but to embrace. Many a time I've detoured and I've thought that, whatever that is happening in our country is actually happening 20 years later than what happened in the US before. So whether the GDS came into prominence and the hotels then started looking at GDS, or the .com. But today, given that the way we are all connected, everything that is happening in the US is also exactly happening in the country at the same stage. We are thought leaders and we're exchanging our points of view across the globe. And therefore, there are huge, great best practices that are being adopted. And therefore, how is it that our business is also embracing, and how is it that India is keeping pace with all that? So delighted to, and I look forward to contributing to.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much on that. It's a very, very powerful points that you mentioned. I'm going to be coming back to you with a lot of questions on the technology side, like I mentioned earlier. But for now, I would like to have some opening comments from Mr. Parveen Chander Kumar. He's the Senior Vice President, Sales and Marketing of the Indian Hotels Company Limited. The Indian Hotels Company Limited. Prior to this, he was the Area Director of West India and General Manager Taj Lands End, with a portfolio of 10 hotels, 1,587 keys, and a turnover of $101 million. With over 2 decades of experience, Mr. Kumar is a seasoned industry professional who brings with him an intense passion for the industry. His key strengths lies in hotel operations, food and beverage, revenue management, sales and marketing, and finance, where he has achieved exceptional results and are delivering strong financial performance, improving service standards, and maintaining excellent relationships with stakeholders. Mr. Parveen, basically, there's a whole lot of things that you can speak to about the real engine room of the industry, the hotels, and what's really happening there. What are the customer touch points that are being impacted by COVID? What are the innovations the hotel industry is doing, and so on. But for now, it'll be nice to have opening remarks by you.
Thanks, Raghavan, and my colleagues Ashish and Ravish have given a very good start, and I was quite impressed with the history of the travel, what Ashish spoke about. So, I like the topic, more baggage, but I personally would see that I'm quite an eternal optimist, and I agree with the last line which Ashish said, that our industry is currently on an inflection point, and what we are currently doing is what has already happened in the rest of the world about 20 years back, or I would say even 30 years back. So in America, about 35 years back was when the roads started kind of coming up and people started traveling. And that's what the pandemic has kind of, brought it in forefront for our people. So to start with a little bit of things that I would like to add, our industry has always been a kind of a very, very primal state in this country. And that's because we've had poor quality infrastructure. Government has taken fairly long to even recognize us as an industry. So when it comes to kind of working towards creating an infrastructure for people who come to India, we already are defeated even before people land here. And that's been changing. And I would say that a lot of work has been done in the last 5 to 7 years, but we're still quite far from what requires to be done. At the same time, there are huge concerns about other things with respect to the kind of infrastructural requirement which are normal international tourist needs, right from the ease of getting visa, which was happening during the 2018 and 19, leave aside the pandemic. So I think the baggage was very high in the past. As we speak, I am hopeful that baggage particular to the kind of infrastructural requirements will get better. Coming back to the pandemic, we've all suffered quite badly. We have a very, very fragile P&Ls, and from a hotel industry point of view, I can tell you that with a very heavy fixed cost infrastructure, and specifically the new hotels where people borrowed money at very high cost, and even putting up a hotel in India is extremely difficult, despite of the fact that thinking that it's quite a cheap market, getting the right plot of land at the right place costs you a hell of a lot of money. And that's kind of really impacted the industry over the last, I would say, 18 months. And we have seen a lot of duress among the owners, which kind of has created a bit of a problem with the system. And that's actually the main baggage that we need to address. But in the last 6 months, we have seen a huge amount of change in the consumer habits. And that's what makes me quite an optimist for the future. And what I personally feel that what we have seen with respect to the Indian consumer coming out and domestic tourism boom, which has happened after the second wave and between first and the second wave, has actually pushed her back into a fairly significant levels of revenue compared to what we were doing in the year 19 and 20. And good enough to kind of start making profit, and good enough for us to kind of, taking care of the cash flows as we speak in the last couple of months. So I think from here onwards, we are only going to go up, and three factors are going to completely govern and change how the industry will behave from here. One is Indian traveler has actually rediscovered India. The last 2 years, that rediscovery of connections, making sure that these hidden gems of hotels in various places, and it's not just the traditional golden triangle or the palaces. It's actually smaller places which are doing quite well, and I consider that that's going to continue, right? The second thing is that's happening all over the world. That's the human race, where we are kind of learning to celebrate ourselves a little more. We are now want instant gratification. So you do see people coming out and vacationing in a hotel on a weekend. We do see people, kind of taking more than 2 or 3 vacations in a year, and that's going to continue. And the third part is the hybrid models of vacation, which means people are working and at the same time having a vacation, is again going to stay. So we still, when I look at the corporate segment, almost 70% are still not back in office. And these are the people who are kind of sitting out of home and working, and they're fed up. And firstly, they have extra cash because you're working from home and your salaries haven't really taken so much of a hit. So there is additional money which, if they don't put into the stock market or cryptocurrency, of course they would like to spend on themselves if they make profits there. And in fact, these guys are also now quite well educated, and I've been saying this for some time. When I talk to people today, people have learned about cuisine, about food and beverage far better than what they were doing before, and they're far more bigger, experience seekers. So it's good in a way, and it's also tough for us, because what happens is that today the customer that you used to deal with 2 years back understands everything from the kinds of bread to the different kinds of Indian gravies, to, because he's all educated. People have been sitting at home and doing that. So these are all changed market scenarios, and I see that from here onwards. This morning we had a kind of an article by our managing director which says cautious optimism, and I think that's what I feel, that if we are okay in the next 2 to 3 weeks with this new virus strain, doesn't really impact us, I'm quite optimistic about business, not just bouncing back, but actually the next couple of years are going to be quite good for India. And I would also say that in a good way, we are not missing our international tourists, because the average size being spent by the Indian tourist is not bad. It's not at 100%, but I would still say it's in the range of 70–80%. And that's very good, because, with a little bump in the occupancies, you are actually sustaining yourself. So I'm quite optimistic about it.
This is fantastic, Parveen. You could not have set the stage for a very, very positive future for this industry. And I also like the way that you've articulated as to why you believe that. That's fantastic. Talking of per capita spend by a tourist, I remember reading reports that in Singapore, in the days when there's a lot of tourism going on, the highest per capita spending was by Indian travelers into Singapore. So I think the purse sizes of people who are traveling around in the country is only going up by the day, and it augurs very well for the industry. So thank you very much for setting the tone. You are an optimist, and that shows very well in this. And thank you for that thing. I want to move to Ashish. Ashish, I'm impressed with the way that you really trace the industry over a long period of time. So I'm getting a little greedy to ask you, how would you like to look at the future? Let me articulate it in some specific terms. What do you see happening with respect to customers? How are they going to evolve? What's going to change in the requirements? What does the industry have to gear up for servicing them? That is one part of the prognosis that I am seeking from you. The second thing is, I remember you having specific views about the supply chain to the industry has not been that great. So I think this industry has got a little lag time. It takes a little longer cycle time to establish a good supply chain for this supply pipeline to the industry. So would you like to articulate certain points about this, please?
Sure. Um, I'll come into the supply chain first, and then I'll quickly touch on the customer interfacing part.
Yeah.
I think the supply chain is the most critical factor because today it's the most fragmented sector, and it is the most underserved as far as distribution and technology is concerned. Whereas Praveen and Ravish may gleefully look at what the hospitality hotel industry is doing, what's the homestay industry is doing, or how technology is coming into forefront. But if I was to go to the state roadways transportation or IRCTC in the railway tickets or the Shikara on the Dal Lake or the guide in Udaipur, they are very underconnected in the seamless supply chain. And each one, obviously each supplier is on some platform or the other, but perhaps not on a single platform. So till it reaches a position that the backend, if I may use the word, on a supply chain is fully integrated in a model of a plug and play, just as you plug an electricity socket from your wall and you plug it into any socket and you start getting the current. I like to see the entire integration of the supply chain into that electricity wattage. Then if it's plugged into that manner, then you look at the consumer, the customer or the consumer. So whether he's a corporate traveler, whether he's a holiday traveler, it's all merged into one, or whether it's even inbound traveler. Because if you look at the foreign tourist, it's been historically a very traditional way of a customer. He went to a wholesaler on the high street in London. He recommended various destinations. They had a contract with a wholesaler in India, and so on and so forth. I see that the customer overseas is going to be behaving in the same manner as the customer in India is going to be behaving. So therefore, at the user interface front, he would want information and not necessarily transaction, but he would want information, contents, be it on virtual reality, be it on drone videos, be it on look and feel, be it on rating, in a manner which is very easy to understand and cut the clutter and to be able to reach to what he wants. And therefore, the supply chain comes into perspective here, because then he should be able to get onto any supply chain. It doesn't really mean that I'm suggesting he will cut the distributor or the aggregator. That by itself, if I may add here, Raghavan, to conclude, is itself going to be in the future, in the next 5 years, if not now, play a different dimensions. That who did we in the travel industry when I came thought somebody like Amazon will start distributing air tickets, or Paytm would start. So therefore, you'll have these fintech companies being distributed. You'll have retailers, be it Kiryana shop, where fintech service are servicing.
Can I ask you one clarifying question in this? When you look at the supply chain, if you look at the organized hotels, even let's say 3-star up to 3-star, 4-star hotels, looks like they seem to have they all seem to be set in terms of throwing their rooms in the market and making themselves available for online booking, etc. But the real challenge, which is what impressed me very much in your conversation, was that there is a lot of non-hotel tourism and hospitality members of the industry. Whether it's a shikara that you mentioned, or a taxi service, or a train booking, or seamlessness about that. If you look at outside the hotel, is it fair to say that we have a long way to go when you look at this industry just outside the hotels? Is it a fair conclusion?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Is I like to look at the whole thing from a 2025, 2026 perspective, another 3 or 4 years, where you have the entire supply chain integrated in a manner and not fragmented. And even if you look at the hospitality, the hotel part, whereas 3, 4, 5 stars are fine, but they are residing in different platforms, because Praveen may choose to have his inventory on an X platform and not on Y and not on Z. That depends on a contractual and distribution perspective. But like I said, and holidays, if you look at it, are not going to be just like I said, residing out of big cities, taking a flight. People in Europe, some of the largest selling holidays in Europe are hiking and trekking and walking holidays, right? They don't use any flights to go because the distances are such. And with the pandemic, which Praveen and Ravish both touched on, the needs of a traveler are changing. He may just decide to walk for 2 hours into a particular place rather than self-drive, even rather than So the question is, what I'm trying to say is that the information and the route, where you can stop, is all to be viewed as one single product, right? And till that is available to a consumer, I think he will not be wanting to be so adventurous, to be asking his friends, relatives, searching through 50 sites, 50 things. What will be the festival happen? What is going to happen in Kulu when I reach there? What's the cafe I can dine at? Coming back lastly to summarize, even in the hotel perspective, which is changing now, it has to go beyond rooms. So therefore, whether it's pre-check-in, whether it's able to book a gym service, or whether it's able to book a room, you should be able to do it at the time of booking your room, and not when you land up and I have to fill the check-in card again. So therefore, just like the airline, you've built a boarding pass in advance. So I like to see that happening. Lastly, to conclude, and because we touched on consumer, my biggest challenge lies in rating. How do I rate one product better than the other? How do I decide whether it's better to take a Delhi, Rewari, Haryana transport bus or a Delhi, UP transport bus? I'm just giving an example. Because today you go by certain parameters and say, all of us are familiar with it. Let's take the Volvo. Now, what is a Volvo? Volvo is a parameter set that there's a certain kind of bus which is available to you, which doesn't go below a certain standard. That's not a rating, right? So ratings will play a very important consumer mindset, and not just the TripAdvisor kind what you see today. And I think India has a great future if a public-private partnership or a private partnership was to come to set up just rating agencies, which can be meaningfully used at data mining across the industry.
Great, Ashish. That is very, very, very nice. At this point of time, in the next the balanced time that we have, I want to make sure that we cover the following topics: technology, talent, sustainability, the startups ecosystem, and how are we going to address the Bharat, the smaller towns in the country, what's happening, etc. So I'm going to be going around. I want to talk, when it comes to technology, I want to move to Ravish. So in terms of technology, we see certain applications that seem to have taken place very well. People talk about booking online tickets and blah, blah, blah. But if you really look at it, has technology touched the consumers in the very many touch points that they have? For example, I always get, not so happy. The car is stopped in the security gate. Some fancy looking things come up from the ground, and you don't know whether it's going to come and hit you or something like that. Then they check whether you got an engine, whether you got a bonnet, and is there money in your pocket, all that, and they let you go into the porch, right? And then you go, and then elaborate process for checking in, checking out is a big pain. And many times I go to my room and the key doesn't work. You go down all the way to renew the key and things like that. So the question is, technology seems to have been applied in the area that matters to the securing of the business, but is there enough technology going on to make the customers happy in terms of touch points? So what's your experience? What do you see happening on the technology front?
So absolutely, Raghavan, even though you're not asking me directly on the booking part of it, and there is a lot that's happening there from the technology standpoint. Indeed,
please feel free to add.
Yeah, indeed, in the uncertain times that we are going through, and the boom barrier looks like it's still here to stay, and there is nothing despite the pandemic. So obviously, the boom barrier is not saying no to COVID here, and so with all of those things, we're just adding layers of difficulty and hurdles that are there for the guest. But I think, if we were to just take a leaf from what is happening around globally. So airlines, early adapters to technology, so now you can just get your e-ticket, boarding card, all of that, and you could be sitting there bypassing a lot of stress that used to happen earlier. This to the ground level has to still really, touch our 3- and 4-star hotels. Technology has to become affordable. We are hearing things about facial recognition, the voice surround system, the various checkpoints, the bots are coming in, the robots are doing a lot of stuff. There is iPad technology there in rooms, which is saying that, listen, don't even have to get up, and the curtains and the lights are all going to be done. But importantly today, given that the contactless part of the business is really, really an important facet that has to be, what is it that we need to do? And one thing is that how is it the check-in and the check-out process, which really actually takes away any interaction whatsoever. So there would be, for example, how did the whole homestay come into being? Because, you were suddenly choosing a home to go there, and there was only this one person who was really the innkeeper, and the rest of the thing, required that there was no other contact with anyone else who was there. So as far as contactless goes, yes, technology wherever there is there. We've learned to live with QR code now on the menu, for example. We've done away with the menus there. Those elaborate menus have gone away. And our dining experience today is a lot that is dependent on technology.
And that matter, sorry to interrupt, if you look at Airbnb, I mean, you hardly get to see who owns the place, and you hardly get to anybody. Punching number, you go there, take the keys, and your job is done. Drop it in, go off. So, I think some of the players who come in later seem to have cracked the little bit of a customer touch point and made it easy for them. Sorry to interrupt. Please carry on.
No, so that's the part. For us, a lot of technology that has come into our business has actually come from people who have been non-hoteliers. And yet again, what was Ashish's earlier point? We ourselves in the business. So you will have a banking person thinking of technology, and that would happen in the financial progress and prowess of it. But in the hospitality, regrettably, there is lack of thought process that is happening, saying this is what I need. So there is someone else who's pushing us the technology who actually, unfortunately, many a time does not know the business. And therefore, we are struggling to have that adapted and utilized in the business. Just to tell you, for example, our sales and marketing, really, come to think of it, if the contactless part is the one that finds momentum, today, our 5-star hotels, our 4-star hotels have sales account managers. There is relationship managers, which airlines, banking, hospitality. Banking also, you don't see, with the whole online banking advancement that has happened. But the hotels will have to necessarily think that the relationship, where everyone learned the relationship management from hoteliers and hotels, will have to do away if this contactless part of meeting, sourcing business, one-on-one contact, contractual obligations has to really come in, because that itself will be, an impossibility if those would be the rates that will have to come. So to answer your point, there is a lot that is happening in technology, but there is a lot that can happen if there were hoteliers who were thinking technology and giving a brief to say, that's what my business needs, rather than being many times just told that this is what has been created.
Thank you.
Raghavan, if I can just add to what
please do.
It makes great sense. Is that, since 2010, like I said, I've been in the consulting space, and the biggest gap I have found is the business personnel and IT personnel not able to communicate with each other. Business not being able to drive what they want out of IT and what will drive the ROI, and IT not able to understand the business language. And you always needed a translator, but once the systems are done, there's always the testing, and this is not good and this is not good kind of thing. So I think the statement I make here for future companies to grow and this trade to grow, I think the best CEOs, and it could be CXOs, not necessarily CEOs, are going to be the one who understand technology well. And so because their understanding of technology and business would have to ride together. It's not a department in some office to say that's the technology department and that's the sales department and that's the HR department. The IT and business departments will have to be integrated into one unit.
That's a fair point. Yeah. In fact, Ashish, I'm going to be coming around to you a little later, because I think in the technology front, the startups that you've been mentoring may be a good go-to place for this, but I'm going to be coming back to you with a question. In the meanwhile, though, I want to move to...
Raghavan, I just had one comment on the technology, which I want to make. Since I have lived through the pandemic and I was handling a hotel in the last 2 years, I can tell you that the technology embracement and what's happening on the ground floor in India is quite remarkable. In fact, I can tell you that we converted about 150 hotels into contactless check-in, check-out, into what we spoke about, QR codes, into digital payments which come through CC Link. And The same thing when we were trying to do before pandemic was probably at a speed, I would say 5 or 10%. And that's just one part of the example. The other part of the example that I want to give you is that today there is no choice for us to embrace technology, right? So if you need to reach your customers, the traditional channels are dying so quickly that we have no choice but to go to technology, go make sure that you're there in the digital media space, because most of our customers are spending 4 to 5 hours a day just hanging around on all kinds of things on their phone. So either they are Instagramming or buying on the shopping, or they're just trying to figure out destinations. So I feel that in terms of technology, India is today almost at par with Europe, except for the fact that there are some heavy hitters which we still don't have, which are likely to come, which means all NFC technology keys, to which we've actually at the Taj Group have already invested, and we are in that journey. To making sure that everything that you do in the space in the hotel are controlled by technology, because we also see that technology helps you to save mundane manpower. And one last comment that I would make is that pandemic has also made consumers okay with not having people standing in front of them. So today I'm okay to go to a hotel and chat with the person whom I want something in a 5-star hotel if there's a good WhatsApp or a chat bot. The same thing happens with our chatbot on our websites. We do chatbots with Swiggy. So if you need to change your order or do something, it's very convenient. But what really we need to do is the technology has to be adaptive and it has to continuously learn. So that's where it's not just technology, we also need to implement AI. So I think that's one comment I wanted to make.
No, that's beautiful. That's very, very timely comments. But I would like you to stay on, Parveen. I got something else to ask you. You've got several hotels under your charge, and you've been in operations dealing with multiple disciplines within the hotel industry. And today, when you look around, do you see talent crunch? And if there is talent crunch, can you give a color to the kind of talent crunch? What kind of skills are in shortage? And what is the industry really doing to take care of this talent crunch?
So on talent, our industry has always had two distinct problems. One is a problem of oversupply of people at the entry level. So what's happening is that if I look at the history of, I've been in the industry for 30 years. The time when I did my catering college was in the year 89 to 92. And in those days, there used to be a total of about 12 catering colleges in the country. Today, if you look at, I can count close to 500 to 1,000. And so the number of people that we are actually delivering out at the entry level is very high. So that means there is an oversupply over there. But when it comes to good technically qualified people, we are facing a huge amount of pressure of people quitting the industry and going into other industries. And the reason for that are 2-3 things. One, ours is a very heavy emotional labor and a high labor intensive industry. Second thing is that we have a very, very steep pyramid. So that means everybody doesn't get an opportunity to grow so quickly. So what happens is that you land up moving out much faster for instant gratification. And there are other industries which pay you much higher. So I think that's one area where talent migration is a big problem. And actually, I'll also tell you that during the pandemic, initially we had a set of problem where people were all getting laid off and they were didn't have enough jobs. So we had an excess supply. But as we speak, once hotels have started coming back, we again have certain talent areas where you don't have enough people. So, and we see this continuing because, when it comes to senior management, when it comes to, I would say, good quality heads of department, when it comes to revenue managers, when it comes to great bartenders, skill-based jobs, that's where there's a huge amount of migration. And also what started happening is, most of these people also either leave the country and go and do something else. And the new startup culture is actually also impacting us a lot. So the number of new restaurants that are opening, people are quitting jobs and baking breads at home and selling it. Lots of people have started getting into food business, even who were not in food business. So I think this is a problem which is likely to stay. And we at the Indian Hotel Company have had a very interesting way of looking at it. So we do invest heavily into succession planning and career planning, which means we do earmark the next 2 or 3 years of the kind of talent pool that we will need, because we're also expanding very quickly. And then we put our people through a kind of a training session internally and groom them in a mentorship system so that they're able to kind of get groomed. And so far we've been okay with it because we don't generally recruit people from outside. We like our own internal people to grow, but we are also feeling the pain.
Thank you. Thank you. There's one, this is a good time to field one question that has come from one of our distinguished guests. By the way, to everybody's information, we will be taking up Q&A later in the last 15 minutes of this section. We have received the questions, but there's one question which I want to field at this time because it's so topical to what you're saying, Parveen. This is from a gentleman called Aditya Shamshar Malla. On the people front, what innovative strategies do you suggest to attract talent back to our hotels after having lost them in hordes? This is sort of what you were saying, but you might like to briefly recapture the answer that you gave.
So I would focus on a three-pronged approach to make sure that you are the preferred employer, as we say, or employer branding. So one of the most important part is that you need to make sure that you provide people with the best infrastructure to work in, which means the hygiene factors are taken care of, because that's very important in our industry. That starts from the kind of facilities that you offer, to the kind of competitive salaries, to the kind of systems that you offer with respect to all the welfare and so on. So I think that's very important, and that's hygiene. The second most important thing that you need to do to making sure that your talent stays with you is that there has to be a kind of a succession planning system or a career growth plan, where today I can tell you that the younger generation walks up to you, and within the first 1 year of finishing their work, they come and tell you, now what's next for me. So actually you have to be ready with that answer before he comes to you, which means you should be able to tell him that this is what's going to happen to you next, and he should be able to move on. So that's the second part. And the third thing on talent is that people are okay to stay with you even if you let's say are at 70% of the salaries. By the time they see that you as an organization are committed to their growth and learning, and growth part was addressed in my second part, but learning is very important. So what we do is that we have various kinds of tie-ups and things that we are doing to make sure that people get an opportunity to learn at the time when they are kind of working with you. And this requires concentrated programs which are leadership related or are related to skills. And in fact, I just finished my own sales and marketing plan, where we have kind of shortlisted a team of people who would be trained aggressively for 6 months, because we have a pipeline of hotels coming in. And if I don't plan for it now, 6 months from now, I would not have people trained. So I think some of those three factors, and I think all my colleagues of the industry should implement that. So you take care of the hygiene factors, you make sure that you give people growth in the system, and the third is to make sure that you are able to provide them an opportunity to learn.
Great, Parveen. I think I would like to also turn this question to Ravish, because he has very strong experience as well as perspectives on this. Very quickly, if you can add on to on the talent front, please.
Yeah, so Parveen touched the skill part of it, and that is so critical and important. While and essentially when we look at skill from the food and beverage, and that's a skill business. Whether it is the food production or the food service. But the food production part of it, which is essentially kitchen, is that's where you need the skill, and therefore how is it that you're enhancing those levels of skill? The other part in the room business or the sales and marketing business, and that's also a paucity of talent. And this is something that our company has been doing it really aggressively with Institute of Hotel Management. Now that's a skillful job, and the reason why I say that the country is actually deprived of that talent and understanding, because more and more of this very intelligent function, the revenue generator, is actually not at the hotel level today. So when an Institute of Hotel Management student is going and learning at a hotel, first, because of the criticality and the importance of this function, many times the trainee actually is not even exposed to, he's not actually introduced to this function. And that, I think, is a big industry mistake in terms of not training the trainee, who actually has to be one day get involved in revenue generation. So he has no idea by the time he's passing out of his graduation or doing his diploma from an IHM, he has no insight. And secondly, and importantly, because this function is also not at a hotel level, given that most of the functions are now centrally, either by international hotel companies, Indian hotel companies. We do almost 18% of the country's inventory centrally for reservation sales. So one of the things that I'm taking as a charter of demand with the National Council and with the Institute of Hotel Management Principles is to say that the whole skilled knowledge of revenue management and reservation sales is something that has to be taught, because what will happen is that we will actually hold the talent for that initial 1 or 2 years when actually the industry loses this talent. Because even if they were to grow senior in terms of a skilled knowledge for that 1 or 2 years, they become extremely relevant to the business. Their career progression is back into front offices, back into sales, back into quality assurance, back into revenue management, training and quality is then diverse and therefore interesting.
Thank you, Ravish. Between what you, Ravish, said and what Parveen said, I think you covered a whole spectrum of aspects about the talent. I did hear that you all alluded to the fact that there is crunch, and you also alluded to the fact that you're being optimistic, and therefore a lot of hotels are being planned. To any youngster out there or any professional out there who's questioning whether or not he or she should join the industry, I think the way that you portrayed it is very optimistic, and there is no doubt that there is phenomenal opportunity for making a career across multiple skill sets in your industry. So it's a very good thing that both of you have patched together a whole bunch of points which are very relevant. Thank you so much for that. Like I said, I want to move on. I want to cover something from in the startup world, because every one of the industries that we are touching has been greatly helped, if not impacted or disrupted, by what's happening on the technology and innovation front, which is currently represented by the startup world. Ashish has been the founder of Startup Mentor Board, and I know that you are currently mentoring a lot of startups. It'll be lovely to hear from you, Ashish. What are the kind of startups that are working in this space of hospitality and tourism?
Well, first of all, let me outline the good part about the startups is they come with no baggage. Right? They come from outside the industry. And so they look at a zero slate when they started. And that's
but on a lighter note, I have to say this. On a lighter note, this industry should love baggages, but not of the baggage of the concepts, but of the real baggages, because there's a large number of baggages that represents a lot of tourists. So it's a good thing for us.
Yeah.
But I understand the baggage you're talking about.
Correct. So baggage of thoughts and perspective. But let's just come back rather than looking at what these guys are doing. In the holiday space, and the holiday space here is the outbound holiday, domestic holiday, or even inbound, which is going to be seeing changes over the next 2-3 years, the way people in high street in the UK book their business versus what they book today. The biggest cost, whichever way you cut it, is actually an inquiry cost. Because the cost of handling an inquiry, a typical distributor, or it could be on the internet or it could be on the non-internet, with the number of inquiries, the time which takes, the skills which are required, the efficiencies you want to build, the convertibility of the whole flight. You may actually be getting 50 inquiries, but actually at the end of the day, you do 5 actual transactions. If that be so, you got huge costs for those 45. So therefore, whether you're in the startup world or whether you're in the existing industry, you have to find a formula that you offer the best contents, the best possible manner, whether it's do it yourself or vernacular into it, or voice-based, or putting the supply lines in place, that the number of inquiries actually cut the ratio between actual transaction and materialization. So
Ashish, given your vantage point, would you like to let us in on some inside the mentor group? Could you like to tell us what kind of work is going on in the mentor in the startup world for vis-a-vis this industry? Just a couple of things.
Yeah. So this is what exactly I said, is that the inquiry versus the materialization.
Yeah.
So startup world, whoever talks to me from an ideation state or coming otherwise, is looking at the perspective of offering a customer interfaces which makes the customer be prompted to get all information, anything he may want. use any fancy words, whether you're bringing it an AI into it or whether you're bringing vernacular, but you want to make it as quickly so he digests. So you have a huge spectrum of startups who are trying to solve the challenges of a customer. When you say solve the challenges of customer, it says actually that the customer gets everything he wants as quickly as possible, as faster as possible, as efficiently as possible, and that includes information and possible. So out of all the, if I was to put 100 startups in a basket, I would see that 60 or 70% of them would be actually working towards the same formula of trying to drive interactability between the customer. That's another matter, that somebody is looking at one part, another is looking at another part, and the sum of all parts may become one part. The second phase of it is, of course, the supply chain. For example, there is a startup guy who only specializes, I know, he's a 3-member guy on railway bookings, because he saw traditionally railway tickets from IRCTC, you could only see the schedule, you could only book the schedule because the API didn't give it beyond. So he started developing an interface. He's an ex-IIT kind of a kid, where the possibility of your train getting confirmed from Gorakhpur to Patna would throw up. Whether it can be confirmed or it won't be confirmed. What are the chances of getting it confirmed? Because there are a lot of people who take RAC ticket and they don't know whether it will be confirmed or not. And can you imagine if you were on a holiday, as hoteliers would know, this ability to get it converted is very important, because the hotel at the other end would say, I want my advance now. But he says, but my ticket is not confirmed. How can I give you advance today? And so on and so forth. So therefore, this guy is trying to see in the railway that possibility. And if that is not possible, suppose there is a zero possibility, quickly throws in an air option, that here's the cheaper option, you know, the rail ticket will cost you 3,000, but would you pay 4,000 and get an instant confirmation? So staring at it, he would say, I rather, okay, I can pay 1,000, at least I'll secure my hotel at the other end, and so on and so forth.
Beautiful.
So, you know, things like these.
So what I hear you say is that there's a lot of work going on in the startup world. All of them are looking at customer interface, making things easy for the customer, and make it as seamless as possible. So it's a very interesting thing. So we will stay tuned to the startups that you're mentoring, and maybe we will hear about a few unicorns coming out of your mentees. So good luck with that, Ashish. I would like to move on to two important topics. One is to do with sustainability. So what is the industry doing with respect to sustainability? I would like Parveen to sort of come in on this, because you are currently handling so many properties. And what are you doing with respect to sustainability, whether it's to do with energy consumption reduction, or water wastage, food wastage, and so on. So over to you, Parveen. You're on mute, Parveen.
Sorry, in terms of the Indian hotel company, Raghavan, we've been able to work on certain key themes for sustainability. And one of them for sure, as you said, is saving electricity. So there's a lot of power that we get now from renewables, which means depending upon different states where there are different kinds of arrangements, we do buy a lot of solar power. And at the same time, in certain places, we buy power from wind energy. And I think that's kind of something which has been very helpful. Every year, we kind of work to ensure that we should be able to reduce our energy consumption. And there's a lot of technology which is going into that, right? From electricity to be converted into LED. There are new technologies which have come for the air conditioning, air handling units, where the motors are far more efficient and they kind of work on a technology which saves 30 to 40%. All this has been going on for the last few years. Then there is also a lot of work which happens with respect to water. So most of the water in our hotels are gray water is recycled. In fact, we've also now started off an exercise about 3 years back where we've started having our own water bottling plants. So, there's a lot of plastic and water which goes waste because you give people mineral water bottles in the room, and that's actually can be easily done if you have your own water plant. So some of our key hotels have already got water treatment plants, and that's one thing which we want to do for most of our hotels in the future. In addition to that, our key hotels in cities also have compactors to kind of get the food waste compacted, which is converted into manure. So that helps the landfills, and we don't really have to kind of go and dump it anywhere or give it to the piggeries. So these are some of the key areas where, in terms of sustainability, we are working. And what we do is we follow a system with a company called as Earth Check, which audits us every year. And I'm very happy to know that almost 70% of our hotels are at gold level. And this is a journey over the last 9 years. So it's not happened right now. So year after year, we are supposed to show a sustainable improvement in all the factors, right from carbon footprint to everything else that I spoke before. And we also have almost 10 hotels now which are at the highest tier, which is platinum. So that's kind of very helpful. And we feel that responsible tourism is extremely critical. So we are also now very soon going to focus upon 100% plastic free, which we are kind of working on. So these are certain areas where we've kind of been on the forefront for sustainability.
Yeah, I can certainly see good competition between the hotel chains to be responsibly luxurious, as they call, and there's a lot of race to get all the properties under a LEED platinum rating and so on. So it's a great development. I think it's a must for saving the earth from unnecessary energy consumption. So it's a great. Thank you for this. I think these are interesting steps. One small trivia that I've always felt I wanted to communicate to a hotelier like you is this. When you go and sit in a restaurant and they bring water, they serve you in a glass of water. I mean, pre-COVID days, they used to do this. Now some hotels do, some hotels just hand you a small bottle of water. I always find, why do they have to pour it till the brim? I'm sure when the person gets up and goes away, at least 50% of those glasses is always left. And I'm sure you're not going to use it for drinking purposes. So why don't you make it a mandate that everybody should only pour half the glass of water? If they want more, the guests can always ask. That's a trivia.
Well, I think it's always the ambiguity of, is the glass half full or half empty? So we want to avoid that. But that's on a fun note. But what you said is true, and I think that's why one of the key reasons to do that is that you kind of see. We always have a challenge of what is service and what is saving. So as five-star hotels, you always have to kind of balance it up. But now customers are becoming extremely vigilant, and they're also helping us to do that. For example, another one small trivia I will tell you, that a few years back when we started this exercise, that if you don't want your sheets to be washed every day, you can put a little note on the bed and so on, and the takers were only about 0.5%. Today, almost 15 to 20% people are actively communicating with us and telling us that I don't want my sheets to be done every day. So actually, that's a very, very positive consumer behavior where everybody's kind of very careful and understanding of that.
Also, when you give such crispy white linens for a tandoori chicken eating gentleman, at the end of it, that napkin is going to go to hell with a lot of grease on it. Why can't we? You can put it for washing, but then you're wasting so much of energy. What can be an alternative? Can there be paper napkins kept as well? Because paper napkins can absorb these kinds of things much easier, and you don't have to heat up the environment with washing so many beautiful linens across. Sorry, I kind of digress, but these are some of the innovations that we can do in the area of sustainability. They look very small, but if you really add them all up, it is really significant. So, but I really appreciate it, not to take away the fantastic actions that you already are taking. I am personally aware of many hotels taking lots of actions towards this. And you all have had a very, very tough time in the recent past with COVID. Not only did you have to change the ways that you interact and service the customers, but there have been a lot of additional costs that have come into it. I think the hotel industry has taken it on its chin and gone through the period and come out very nicely and strongly, and rightly so, very optimistically. So I'm going to go to one important point, which is about development. Prime Minister in one of his speeches mentioned that by 2022 is going to have at least 15 locations as fantastic tourist destinations. Now, this is like really getting into Bharat as opposed to just staying with India. Now, we know about the Udaan program, and there have been a lot of conversations and programs that are tailored to making these destinations great tourist destinations. So I want to ask you, Ravish, are there things that you see? You're on the vantage point of seeing what's going on in the whole country. What's happening on this front?
I think, in 2017, I think it was that year when Honorable Prime Minister did make this Uday Desh Ka Naam Nagrik as Udan was launched, and then also came along the announcement that at least, every citizen of the country should really be looking at least travel within 15 cities within the country. And that was providence, because, who was to know? I mean, how, in a manner of speaking, that the COVID would just accelerate this discovery. The important facet is that, how every branded hotel also, where earlier the development was used to be largely concentrated on the metro locations, because that's what they used to think that the profitability lay. Not only the hotels would come in metro locations, the airlines would also fly to these sectors largely. So this encouragement, and I can talk more of the hotel part of the business, that how these tier 2 and tier 3 cities have actually started seeing all these branded hotels started coming in. And there have been local chains or local hotels that have actually been very, very profitable. I mean, today, when we still look at a city like, let's say, Kanpur, for example, still has just one hotel. And there hasn't really been any inroad done by any other branded hotel. So there is just so much of discovery to be made by these brands and for the business. So also one of the big important revelation as a customer behavior that we study, that in this last few months of discovering India or discovering Bharat, what the customer has started recognizing, because of the price point, which actually allows affordability. So someone who was staying at a 3-star can now afford a 4-star. One who was staying at a 4-star can actually look at the pricing point of a 5-star. And therefore, what is really happening as an outcome of that behavior is that you are getting exposed to a nicer product. Obviously, you're discovering India. You're also getting, discovering a nicer product. What is the likelihood that you will actually go away from that product when actually prices were to just go up and become higher? So you would have discovered, and therefore there is this whole qualitative push that is going to happen, and therefore the country as a whole is going to gain. So there is this debate that goes on saying that, listen, when the outbound travel will start happening, and would domestic tourism continue to have the thrust that it is experiencing, or there will be a flight out? So I think, in terms of just whether the Udan or the promise of the 15 cities, and the fact that there is this inherent desire for the citizens to just explore our own country, I think, so those are real good signals. And we are experiencing it from the standpoint of the business that I lead, that the first-hand information which says that it's delightful, things that were not doing well earlier are the ones that are knocking doors at today in terms of opportunity.
Great. That's really a good answer. I'm going to quickly turn to Ashish if he wants to add anything to this particular point. Ashish.
Well, I'm particularly very happy with the Udan scheme, but I'm more excited to see in future that getting converted to water bodies, aqua ports, because especially in the northeast of the country and in many parts of the country, the ability to land on water or lakes or ponds, because that will give a whole new dimensions to be able to access this, which today globally is an important phenomenon. And second, again, when I'm touching water, river, not cruising is an expensive word or a luxury word, but the ability to travel on water to touch would again open up a different dimension as far as the country is concerned. And no doubt, because of COVID, the remote locations and remote stay is here to stay and flourish. So therefore, all these have to be linked together to make it very accessible, both in terms of access, both in terms of infrastructure, and lastly, of course, what has been harping on in terms of rating. How do I know this, if I land on this lake in Bardwan and go to this little cottage on the thing is rated well, and not the other one, So therefore, and lastly, again, when I'm on the subject of water, because that to me in a country like India is a very important aspect, is on the inbound side, India must, and having worked for P&O and Princess Cruises myself, I know what an important route India is when it comes to global cruise industry. We might be not seeing two great things happening on the cruise industry now, but I like to see better ports in the country, be it in Goa, be it in Mumbai, be it in Cochin, be it in Calcutta, and of course, a well-concentrated effort by the government to woo the global cruise liners to come and touch India in some manner. And that has to be a concentrated long-term effort, because global cruises don't decide that tomorrow I'm going to sail around the world and I'm going to touch Goa and Bombay and connect. They decide 3 years in advance, 4 years in advance. So I like to see water in many ways. I don't want to use the word water tourism, but I want to see water being optimized to its to maximum.
Fabulous. That's definitely a great new dimension, Ashish. Thank you so much.
And Raghavan, I would just like to add one more thing. Let's not also forget the beautiful road infrastructure that the last 10 years this government has produced. So, in fact, in the beginning of the comment, I said that what happened to America about 35 years back is happening to India now. It's very interesting to see that our industry now is likely to go through an inflection point. Today, if you needed to open a hotel, you have to be in a large city, you have to be close to the city, the cost of the land was expensive. With great roads, you could be probably 30, 40 kilometers away. You could be actually in middle of nowhere. By the time you have experiential hotels, which kind of are able to keep the customer engaged, we feel that, and with great SUVs coming, if you look at the kind of volumes of cars which Indians are buying, everybody wants to buy a larger car and SUV. I feel that that's going to unlock a different set of tourism in this country, which we've never seen. And that's one area which is kind of waiting to be used.
Yeah. If I may add, Praveen,
yeah, please do.
Of course, the caravans. We know acceptability worldwide that they are a big source of people moving from point A to B, carry on home. I like to see bigger investments coming in. And there's a startup guy who was wanting to start a caravan. He said, so what do I need? I'll import 2 of them, make a circuit, and just tie me up with some hotels remotely where I can park in where the hotels are. My clients can go and eat in that restaurant of that hotel, get the electricity from the hotel, and I'm on my way the next morning somewhere else. That kind of a thing. It could be a simplest way, really.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for those comments. And I'm going to move to Q&A, but I want to have a 1-minute answer for 2 quick points from Ravish and Parveen, because it will be unfair if we don't touch these 2 topics. But rapid fire, very quick question answers. On accessibility, what is the hotel industry doing? And on diversity and inclusion, what is the hotel industry doing? I mean, these are big topics. So I'm sorry to be crunching the time, but I'm sure that you will be able to give a quick high-level answer. May I move to Ravish on this first and then to Parveen?
I think we have been at the cusp of, we've been the drivers of change, and both diversity and inclusiveness is a big, it's a talk point today. It's every company worth its while in this business has that as a big agenda, as a big charter of an expectation that we have. We have this obligation towards our employee workforce, and there's a lot of good activities and things, examples that are across in the industry. Parveen will have for his own company, and for my earlier company, there are just so many examples. Many of my clients who are driving this change. Just to talk about it, it's certainly not in any lack of inertia as far as the inclusivity is concerned or the diversity is concerned. Humdrum of activity, I would say that.
Great.
So, on diversity at the Indian hotel company or in general in Indian hotels, there is a bit of a challenge, and our usual workforce, usual women about 15%, and 15 to 18%. Newer hotels have an advantage because they can kind of recruit more people. So what we are doing is that we have a full developed plan where we work towards having infrastructure created where we could kind of attract more women to come and work with us. In fact, we've just launched the first all-women hotel, which was the Wellington Mews in Chennai, and we have plans to do a lot more of those. And in addition to that, there is also an internal systemic change that you need to bring, and one of the key work that you need to do in that is again quite similar to what I told before. One is you need to take care of the hygiene factors, which means how are you going to security, making sure that the environment is inclusive, making sure that they're kind of well taken care of. That's one. And the second is that you also need a lot of role modeling. So you need to ensure and actively engage in senior leadership to have enough women, because then kind of that creates a drag effect. And we also have targets for our senior leaders and most of our hotels, where we kind of review it, and it's not more of a commitment than a target, where we move towards that, what is going to be the total number of percentage of women in our hotels in the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, women is good. I think the direction is good. But what about differently abled people? Is there a focused program to employ these people?
So,
and are hotels physically created in a way that they are accessible to physically challenged people?
Yeah, so the two parts of it. So hotels being accessible to physically challenged people, that's all our hotels are accessible, because that's from a customer point of view, because that's a requirement from the government of India. You can't have a 5-star rating if your hotel does not have all areas accessible to physically challenged people. In terms of employees, we work actively to support that set of people. I would still say that it's only nascent. We haven't really been able to do much about it, but we still focus a lot more on areas like where you have a lot of creativity involved, like at the back end, housekeeping, kitchens. In fact, even we do have therapists in certain hotels who are visually challenged, and they take care of medical treatments and foot massages and so on. So I think the work on that front has started, but overall the industry is a little slow on that. And I think as the time goes by, that would be the next level that you will choose.
Yeah.
Let me just add, there is a great example in Lemon Tree Hotels, for example, who are the biggest, largest employer, for differently abled people. And that's a great, what the industry, and there is great acceptance. In fact, they've got the highest amount of guest reviews, which are extremely positive for those who are, getting served by these staff members. So
yeah, you just took my words out of the mouth. I was speaking to Parthu, and then in fact I was trying to get him on this panel today. He has some wedding to attend, so he couldn't be on this panel. But he has done a lot of work both in training and also employing differently able people. I should also give credit to Cafe Coffee Day, has employed over many of their locations people like this. I think we are underestimating the power of satisfaction of the customers when they are getting served by these people in one form or the other, and they are so okay with it, and they're so happy to know that this institution is supporting differently able people. I think we have a long way to go, but I'm glad that at least there are examples, and the whole movement is in the nascent stages. So I'm afraid that's all we have the time for these conversations, but I'm going to open up the Q&A, and I will request answers from some of you. There has been a question that has come before. I think this question we've already answered, but let me call out the question. Is there anything concrete being executed to promote Bharat as a responsible tourist destination globally? Sorry, this question has not been answered. To promote Bharat as a responsible tourism destination globally, this has been asked by Mr. Akalp Johari, Director, India Assist Insights Private Limited. Who would like to pick the question? I will move it to Parveen.
So what I'm aware of, the Government of India, Ministry of Tourism has started work on it recently, where I did see certain communication campaign where they're going and talking about the vaccination that has already happened in India. And I think that's the first step. And I haven't still kind of got all the details of it, but I'm sure that that's initiated.
Thank you. There's another question. I think this question is certainly answered from Mr. Debasis Basu Chowdhury, Business Head, Instacare Center. How will the industry shape up for freshers from the hospitality colleges after the pandemic? What is the job scenario next year, 2022, 2023? I think between Ravish and Parveen, we've answered the question. There is phenomenal optimism. We heard Parveen saying there are so many hotels, properties that are waiting to be opened, and there is generally talent crunch. So I think the answer to you, Debasis, is that you should stay optimistic for this category of freshers coming from the hospitality colleges. Third question is, what are the new and cost-effective doable ways for revenue generation travel trade? Parth Satpathy, Director, 5D Global Travel Solutions. I will move this question to Ravish.
So one of the things that we are experiencing, and I think the industry is talking a lot, it's the demand of the guest. And I think, just from a travel agent perspective, experiences are going to be the big next thing in terms of just what the expectation is. If the new destinations are being discovered, new hotels are being discovered. So it is this intermediary, our wonderful travel agent as our travel partner, who can actually be guiding a lot in terms of experiences and selling those experiences, and therefore having yet again a revenue stream for themselves as well as for the hotels, even before the guest physically comes to the hotel.
Thank you. The next question is, there are two questions I'm going to move to you, Ashish. The first one is scope and development of hospitality and tourism sector in Uttarakhand. If you have any specific views about it, you can say. This is from a gentleman, Rajendra Kumar, Director of RGCOMS. Would you have any views on this? Otherwise, we'll have to move to the next question.
Unfortunately or so, Uttarakhand being a hilly area has got stereotypes on a certain set of tourists, be it on trekking or be it on religious tourism or be it so. And with the fragile ecosystem today, again, there are various thoughts in development. I think Uttarakhand is something we'll have to watch and wait over the next few years. And whatever the Prime Minister and the government has done in terms of the infrastructure, we have seen some road transportation go better, etc., to see how we can capitalize on bringing the homestays and bringing the remote destinations all together under one connectivity basket. I think would be the most optimum way to move at the moment.
Thank you. The one more question for you, Ashish. This is from Mr. Aditya Shamsher Malla. Given the disruption in the yet evolving models of distribution and revenue management, how do we see the shape and form of distribution models in the future, short and long term? What role do we see AI and ML? See for AI and ML.
Yeah. Okay. Before I quickly jump onto AI and ML, I keep repeating vernacular is going to be the big factor, because if you want the next billion users, I can't imagine Kanta Ben sitting in Surat to be able to go to a complicated website in English and know all the terms and conditions and to be able to understand. So rather than AI and ML, if whether it's your website, whether it's your customer center, whether it's your staff dealing, if you get into vernacular, because we know from the television channels, we know from the news that vernacular does sell. There is a consumption of vernacular content. Number one. Number two, obviously AI and ML is an important aspect to be able to convert inquiries, which I said earlier is the big waste. Because if you are on the AI, you would put various bots into it. You take the human out to at least the inquiry level till such time you are ready to have a human come in and say, okay, here's the kill, right? So yes, it will shave a lot of your cost and mundane questions, because quickly to say, even in hotels, Ravish will confirm and Parveen would concern that the calls you may get directly are very mundane, right? If I may use the word, they may not be mundane to the consumer, but they can easily be answered by a bot or somebody else answering. So AI would play a role on a bot term for one, for sure.
Thanks. I want to move this next question to Parveen. This is from Mr. Venkatesh. I would like to ask, most of the hotels like Marriott, Hilton, and others are planning for Bluetooth locks installations in pipeline. What is the plan on room automation for lighting controls, etc.? Is a question from Mr. Venkatesh.
So the technology currently available for locks and lighting of the rooms has really, gone leaps and bounds ahead. So what really happening is everything that's greenfield, it's easy to do. Whatever are brownfields are slightly slow to adapt. However, in that also there are two parts of it. So locks, actually NFC is much easier and faster to do. So there's no, in Bluetooth locks are not I haven't really kind of seen that technology, but NFC locks are very, very successful. And
Gautam, would you like to have a spotlight, Mr. Venkatesh, in case there's a little dialogue that wants to be done on this? Sorry, continue, Mr. Parveen.
Yeah, so we are already moving towards NFC locks, and that's, I think, is one thing which is going to be the main future. As far as lights are concerned, it depends upon how much technology enabled you want to have your hotel. So you could have probably just put an audio device like an Alexa, and everything else can be controlled from there, to lights which are actually sensor controlled, which means the lights and the air conditioning gets operated based on the motion that you have in the room. So all that technology is available, and most of the green fields are kind of, as I said, easy to do. The others are done as and when the renovations happen.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a question from Naman Sharma. Do you think that there is a huge amount of scope in terms of large business return from the leisure market ahead in comparison with the business? Maybe this is a question Ravish could take.
We are experiencing it. I mean, so that's what leisure as an industry. When you look at it, I mean, in terms of not only occupancy, yes, there's been an erosion in occupancy for even leisure hotels, but the pricing part of it, the average room rate, which is largely an index of our pricing, is hardly, it's about 8 to 9% only as a deficit today between what was pre-COVID times to what it is now. And that's really a great shot in the arm for our business. I mean, who was to know that, things that were a struggle earlier? I mean, look at the flights because of the leisure destination that are busy. Look at the people, the road trips that started coming. That gave the campaign a different flavor and a different perspective to all our hotels, where all these leisure travelers were discovering new destinations. So leisure and even, hotel companies today have shifted their focus more on a leisure investment, having asset light and, discovering hotels that could be come into leisure destinations. Very clearly so, winner on the card.
Thank you. We are at 5:30. With permission, I'm going to take another 5 minutes if it's okay. So many interesting questions. I'll finish up within the next 5 minutes. This question is from Mr. Ranjan Chatterjee. Startups with B2C OTA dynamic segment also come with baggage of thoughts to become MMT within no time. What roadmap do you suggest them? This is specifically to you, Ashish, from Mr. Ranjan Chatterjee.
Well, Ranjan, I don't see another MMT coming, right? So if you're a startup, if you call yourself OTA, the best thing is solve the problem which others have not been able to solve on, and integrate and collaborate with the existing industry, right? Because there won't be, I doubt very much, too many MMTs being born. There would be. I think there is a space for at least 3 or 4 more, but not 15 or 20 or 30. But yes, critical challenges, it's easy, align with existing players, be it in the corporate travel space, be it in online space, be it even hoteliers. I mean, Parveen here would take a distributor perspective from selling his rooms if he sells it differently to the industry or so on and so forth.
Since Ranjan is apparently your good friend, he's got another question which I'm going to direct to you, Ashish. As per Indian Brand Equity Foundation, last updated on 7th of May 2021, by 2029, India's tourism sector is expected to grow 6.7% to reach $35 trillion, rupees 35 trillion, which is US dollars 488 billion, and accounting for 9.2% of total economy. International tourist arrival in India is expected to reach 30.5 million by 2028. Question is it achievable?
Well, these are statistics, and I don't want to look at numbers. All I want to say that the way we are looking at India ourselves, Indians are looking at India as a holiday destination, and all the development we've been talking about, remote, etc. All we have to do now is translate this into the overseas market to be able to communicate our story in the right perspective. And of course, bring about the connectivity from international markets into India. And I think if you can do that, government of India can do that. I think we're a winner. And India must become an internet bookable destination. India is not today for a foreign tourist bookable over the internet, as you would book a holiday to Dibrugarh or Assam. So you should be able to book a holiday from Kenya to India in the same manner you book from here to Kenya, if I may say so. If that happens, these numbers are possible, of course.
Thank you, Ashish. Very last question. This is to Parveen. This is from Rakhi Purohit. As mentioned during the discussion, experience stay would be the next big thing for tourism industry, and with work from home concept, corporates would curb. Would big brands with larger inventory have a positive outlook?
So I did say that in one of the questions that I do see experiential travel being one of the key focus areas, and that's because of 2 reasons. One, because people want now to kind of collect more memories, and there's a lot more leisure than corporate happening. And the second thing is I do see that that in general all over the world there is this euphoria about celebrations or trying to kind of collect experiences more than collecting money. And that happens at a certain stage. And it's more because of the sentiment of COVID and what's really happened. So we actually have a lot of customers when they're coming to a hotel now would ask you that what am I going to do there? What do you have to offer? So we're all working towards making sure that our hotels and properties are experience driven. And in fact, when we roll out campaigns and packages and everything else, it's towards experiences. And the third thing why experiences are here to stay is because look at the average age of your Indian customers who are now coming and staying with you. That's all under the age of between, I would say 35, between 25 and 35. There's a lot of people traveling in that age. And they are not coming to a place to sit down in a room. They want activities, they want to be involved in doing things. So these are three things that
and Praveen, somewhere I think the social media and Instagram is making that difference.
Of course, yeah. That's very true. The holiday has to be good enough to put on the Instagram.
Yeah. In fact, nobody eats food when it is served. It's photographed, commented upon, posted on Instagram, and later on, if they remember, they eat it. That's what it is. Okay, so I'm afraid I've already exceeded the time. There are still a few more questions, but I'm afraid that we won't be able to take them up now. I want to respect the timing of everybody. Questions that are there on the chat box and the Q&A, we will try and answer them specifically by getting views from the panelists. Ashish, Ravish, and Parveen, you've been such generous people to have spent so much time in giving really well thought out, considered points of view. And I'm sure when you patch them all together, while it is muscle memory for you, it's a great amount of knowledge and great amount of insights that have come through the Blue Circle webinar today. I cannot thank you enough for your time and intellectual engagement on this platform. Really, really appreciate it. We have really covered a whole bunch of topics, right from tracing the whole evolution of the industry to the current challenges, including talent crunch and what's happening on technology, what's happening on sustainability, what's happening on accessibility, what's happening on diversity and inclusion, what's happening on making Bharat a part of the mainstay, and what's happening on the startup world. We really had a wide variety of topics discussed, and I should say that we couldn't have found another set of panelists who would have answered them with so much authenticity and deep knowledge. Thank you very much for all of you. I want to thank all the guests who have joined in today's webinar. I really thank you for taking the time. And Friday evening, 4 to 5:30 is not exactly the most convenient time for many people, and especially all of you, the panelists who are all busy in your own lives. Really appreciate it all the more. I thank the guests once again. I thank Blue Circle for giving the opportunity for all of us to be able to speak on this very, very important sector. Over to you, Gautam.
Thank you very much, sirs. Such an insightful and engaging conversation, and a privilege to hear you all. And very well moderated, Mr. Raghavan. Our guests and I have been hooked on till the very end and have taken home several nuggets from today's conversation. I wish we had some more time to take this conversation ahead. And thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the end and for always sharing excellent questions. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.